Good afternoon. Welcome to MTS. We're certainly glad that you all are here. Let me begin with some introductions so that you all know who's here. Of course, seated over there in the rear is our esteemed dean, Dr. Pete Gackey. I think you all have probably already met Melissa, who is our director of admissions. Of course, Felicia Levant, who is one of our recruiters in the Dmin program. Like Mike Quarles, of course, who one of our faculty members here who teaches in the Dmin program. Dr. Barry Anderson, who's on both the Dmin committee as well as teaches in the program. And I'm, of course, Christopher Davis, and I serve as the director of the program. If you all indulge, I want to do things just a bit differently. Normally, I start out with my spiel about what the Dmin is and why MTS opposed to some other place. But what I want to do is, I want to respect the fact that our dean has somewhere else he has to be in about 15 minutes, and he's going to give leadership to one of the particular tracks. So we're going to ask him if he would go ahead and tell us about the track, and then I'll tell you about the Dmin program and make reference to that track. Dr. Gackey.
Thanks, Dr. Davis. Let me extend my welcome as well to everybody who's here, especially the prospective students. I'm the academic vice president, dean, and I am delighted with the development that's going on in our Dmin program under the direction of Dr. Davis. We have 3 tracks that are beginning this spring, and I'm going to speak about one of those. I'm not sure if is there anybody here right now who's interested in the land, food, and faith formation track? We have one, good. And Ann and I have spoken at length before, so I'm not going to go into a great amount of detail except to say that this is a new track that's beginning this summer. And I'm very excited about this track because I think it draws together some very important things that are happening in the broader society and in the church. The land is crucial for how we live together as a community. The food that is produced as we're eating lunch is absolutely crucial for our physical well-being, but it also raises larger questions about who's at the table and how did the food get to the table, in addition to what are we eating. We do become what we eat. So this Dmin track is interested in exploring the relationship between care for the land, the way in which we produce food in ways that are beneficial to the creation of community, and then together how land and food come together as part of our life of faith, both as individual disciples of Jesus, but also as members of broader communities and members of faith communities. And what can the role of the church be in the care for the land and in the development and sharing of good food. So that's basically what the track is about. We are really uniquely situated here in the Mid-South for this Dmin track. We have a lot of fascinating local organizations that are involved with the production of food and the sharing of food in ways that are healthy. We also have tremendous opportunity given the urban area that we are in. There's unfortunately a plethora of food deserts, places where there is not healthy food available, and places where there are no grocery stores at all. In fact, as we're learning just recently in the last couple of weeks about the closing of Kroger just off of Lamar in South Memphis. So this is a challenge both locally but more nationally as well. But in Memphis there's already been a response to some of this. There are a number of urban gardening initiatives that are going on. There are a lot of farmers markets that are going on. But the question is, where are the people of faith in relationship to the development of these markets, to the sharing of good food, to the care of the land? Those are the questions that I have, and that we're hoping that the students in this track will also have. So I'm grateful that you're here looking at a variety of the Dmin tracks. If you know people who are interested in issues of food deserts, food justice, and what the role of the church can be in that, and they have already finished an MDiv or a master's degree in some area. They might be interested in looking at this new track that we're hoping to have launched in June. One of the local leaders of the movement for care of land and the development of good food will be teaching our first class, Dr. Noah Campbell, who's been the executive director of Memphis TILF. He's been very much heavily involved with the development of this program, of this track. So we're excited that he's going to be our first teacher. If you have any questions about the classes that will be offered and sort of the progress through this degree program, feel free to contact me. I'm kind of the lead person on the campus for this particular program. Any questions? Let's find out about the Dmin and land, food, and faith formation. Great. Well, thank you again for being here. I'm going to dash off to another meeting, unfortunately. I'll leave you in the capable hands of Dr. Davis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gaggy.
Thank you, Keith.
Again, let's begin with, quote unquote, for lack of a better term, the basics. Just want to kind of just share a few things about Dmin that makes it different perhaps from other degrees. Then attempt to answer the question of why MTS opposed to some other place. Mention some of the other tracks that we offer, and then we'll open it up for questions from you all. Looks like we've got another one joining us. Hello, colleagues, and welcome. To begin with, let's begin with the Dmin itself. I think what's most important that you understand what the Dmin is. And of course, that's not to insult your intelligence, but that's just to make sure that we're all in the same sheet of music. The Dmin is a terminal degree in the practice of ministry. It's important that you hear that you understand that's going to be the primary focus, the practice of ministry. Again, the Dmin is a terminal degree in the practice of ministry. This particular degree is designed ideally for those who are interested in further developing competency in a particular area in the practice of ministry. I want to continue to reiterate that because sometimes students come and do not understand that this is not a research degree. This is not a degree to prepare you for an academic career. One of the things that we like to say sort of tongue-in-cheek, just so you'll know, that the Dmin is for pastors. The PhD is for professors. So of course, and I guess I should say pastors and leaders. So of course, if you're interested in serving the Christian community, then of course the Dmin is the track for you. The focus of the Dmin program is to equip you in being a better pastor, a better leader in a particular context. Now the reason that's so important is one of the things that we assume that when you come into this program, you have a context in which you are already working. It is going to be project-based. That is to say, in the course of the program, as we sort of talk through what your focus is, so what your research agenda is going to be, where you're looking to implement that project, it is going to be necessary that you're already engaged in a particular context. And the context, and when I say context, I just don't want you to hear church, because we've had some interesting programs in a variety of different contexts, and so we'll be able to kind of talk with you specifically in terms of what your particular context looks like. The focus of the Dmin at MTS is consistent with our mission. Now, for those of you who've completed a master's degree at MTS, I'll assume that you're familiar with our mission, but for those who may have not, at MTS, here's our focus. We are committed to educating and sustaining men and women for ordained and lay Christian ministry in the church and in the world through shaping and inspiring lives, here it is, devoted to scholarship, piety, and justice. Throughout the course of all of our programs here at MTS, our master's program as well as our doctoral program, those are going to be the hallmarks: scholarship, piety, and justice. That makes us who we are here at MTS. Now, we're not oblivious to the fact that there are other programs out there. And of course, I assume that you probably looked at some other programs. So what I want to do now is I want to help you sort of discern why I believe that you should give MTS some real consideration. I think one of the primary differences between our program and maybe some other programs that you may have looked at is we're excited that here at MTS we found what I want to refer to as a healthy balance between theory and practice. That is to say, we don't want to make light of all of the good work that has been done, all of the theoretical work, the research, and so forth. But if you're like me, here's my confession. When I was a student here at MTS, when I was in the master's program, I didn't care what the class was. If it was church history, if it was Bible, whatever, if it was Christian education, whatever it was, I was a student who sat in the class, and I always raised the same question. If not aloud, at least in my mind. But how can I preach this? Because I was always interested in how can I use this specifically in the practice of ministry. I hear what the researcher says, but does this work in the local church where I serve? One of the wonderful things about the Dmin is the overwhelming focus is going to be on the practice of ministry. And we've been intentional about making sure that we strike a healthy balance. Our expectation is certainly that you're going to be familiar with the larger body of work that's out there. However, once we move beyond that, our focus then becomes how do you use that in your particular context that you'll be able to use to develop a project that will focus on the area in which you are serving. Now, another commitment that we've made, our commitment is to introduce you to and have you to study with some of the most respected practitioners in your chosen field of study. That is to say, your primary instructors will be practitioners. These will not be individuals who read something in a book and then they come back and share with you what they've read in the book. These will be persons who have their hands and feet on the ground. They're actually doing the work on an everyday basis so that they'll be able to share with you. Here's what the instructor says in the book, but here has been my experience in the real world of ministry. We're excited about that. If the Dmin is a degree for practitioners, then it just makes good sense that you're being instructed by practitioners, those who do the work. The other thing, our program here at MTS offers the kind of flexibility where you're able to shape the program to meet your particular ministry goals as well as being sensitive to your particular ministry context. Since it is project driven, you will be able to bring your particular context into, for lack of a better term, the classroom. So you'll be able to design a project that speaks specifically to your context. Now, one of the things that we're hoping is while the project was designed specifically for your context, we hope that your program will be able to be replicated in other contexts that may be similar to yours, so that you will be able to contribute to the overall body of work in your particular area. Another difference between our program and other programs in other places, which I think makes our program great, is that this program is led by practitioners. Matter of fact, I serve as the director of this program. I'm a practitioner. I serve the church. I love the church. I keep one foot in the sanctuary and another foot in the seminary. I contend one informs the other. And in fact, if something were to ever happen where I could not do both, it wouldn't be a hard decision for me to make. Bye-bye seminary. Because I enjoy the practice of ministry. I introduced Dr. Anderson earlier as a person who, as a member of our Dmin committee. Barry is also a practitioner. He and I both hold Dmin degrees. So we've traveled the road that you all are traveling. Now, I did not do my Dmin at MTS, which of course I think is a good thing. The reason I think it's a good thing is because I've been exposed to how the Dmin is conducted in other places. We've looked at other programs around the country. We've adopted best practices. We've looked at our delivery system in terms of what's going to be the best fit for our particular students. And we are convinced that we've designed a Dmin program that is second to none in the country. At the end of the day, my real commitment is to walk with you from the beginning of your program until you get one of these, which is a bound copy of your work. That's our commitment, to walk with you every step of the way, to move you from initial ideas and thoughts to when you finally walk across the stage and you get one of these nice black books with your name on it in the mail. So you will be able to say to all of your friends, your parishioners, your colleagues, I is a doctor. So that is our commitment to you. I think another area where you see our commitment to your success is some of the changes that we've made in the program. In fact, some of these changes are new, but we're excited about it because we're getting tremendous feedback. One of the challenges that we discovered that our students experience is that they're clear, they enjoy the classes, they're clear on what they want to do, they're focused on it, but at some point in the program, the light bulb sort of goes off. This is a degree program, this is a doctoral program. I've got to get it out of my head and on paper. That's where the challenges start to set in. Well, we've addressed that. What will happen here is in the course of your residencies, and of course there are 7 residencies, and we'll talk about that in some greater detail. In residency 1, we will start with an introductory writing workshop that's required, that you will do during your 2-week residency while you're here on campus. We will come back again in residency 3 and require you to do another workshop. But here's the best part about it. This is not just subject-verb agreement, making sure you know how to properly conjugate and all of that kind of good stuff. By the time you make it to residency 3, you've got a pretty good idea of what you want to work on. So when you start workshopping your writing and so forth, guess what you're going to be workshopping? Your project proposal. So by the time you make it to residency 4, we've been intentional in terms of walking with you and developing this, so you don't wake up one day and say, oh my God, I got to be in Memphis in 2 weeks and I don't have a project proposal. We're not going to let it slip up on you again. Our commitment is to walking with you through this program. I think as you look at our tracks, I know all of you will hear from some different tracks, but I think as you look at our tracks, we've got some of the best tracks in the country. We're not trying to do it all. With each track, we've narrowed the focus and we're specifically looking at this area. That is to say, if you're in our preaching track, in every single residency, guess what you're going to be talking about?
Preaching.
Preaching. Give that man a gold star. Are you sure you're not already a doctor? In preaching, we're going to be talking about preaching. When we get to leadership, guess what we're going to be talking about? Any guesses right yet?
Probably leadership.
You're a smart guy. Listen, we're going to be talking about leadership. When we get to the track on forming and growing churches, we're going to be talking about forming and growing churches, whether it's planting churches or revitalizing an existing church. That's what we're going to focus on. In our pastoral care, our pastoral therapy and counseling track, that's what we focus on in terms of pastoral therapy and counseling. As Dr. Gackett mentioned before he left, we got another track on land, food, and faith, and of course, our last track. I'm not sure if anyone here is interested in our last track. We've got a Korean Dmin track. Most of the instructors speak Korean and all of the students speak Korean. But you may be daring. So of course, if you're interested in the Korean Dmin track, we will sign you up. We will sign you. However you feel like you're being led by God, we will sign you up. So of course, that's kind of my spiel in sort of a nutshell in terms of what the Dmin looks like at MTS. Pete talked about land, food, and faith. Let me mention briefly in terms of the track in terms of leadership in ministry. We focus specifically on leadership in terms of how do we become effective leaders in the local church. We will look in terms of how do we evaluate ministry, how do we motivate people to be engaged in the work in terms of ministry, how do we assess strengths and weaknesses of our congregation. We look at leadership in urban context and rural context. We're mindful of some of the social justice issues that are going on in our world. How do we as leaders respond to that in the local context? So we look at leadership in sort of a broad-based sense. In the preaching track, as I mentioned earlier, we talk a whole lot about preaching. Not only do we talk about it, but we do a lot of preaching in that particular track in terms of what we can do, not to make you a carbon copy of your favorite TV preacher, but in terms of helping you to be comfortable in developing and sharing your own authentic voice. We move into, of course, our next track is that of forming and growing churches. Barry is here. He's going to be teaching in that track. I mentioned Michael is here. He's going to be teaching in that track. What we will do is we're going to look at the church. We're going to look at a historical and a theological analysis in terms of the church. How did we get to this place? Why does it even matter? You'll say, has the importance of the church passed us by? So we'll begin to look at that from both a theological and a historical standpoint. From there, we begin to look specifically at in terms of what are the models and methods out there now in terms of planting churches. What are best practices? You'll say, what worked 15 years ago, does it still work now? The interesting part is, and you will hear it from differing perspectives. As a matter of fact, we mentioned Dr. Anderson. Then, of course, we also got Dr. Rosalind Nichols, who's going to come in and share. She's a church planner, as well as a couple of other invited guests that we're in conversation with, so we'll be able to look at sort of a broad-based spectrum. Then we're going to look at in terms of evangelism and church growth. What does church growth look like? In terms of, are we talking about growing numerically? Are we talking about growing spiritually? I mean, what's most significant? Is it budgets and butts on the seat? Do we want to see men and women of faith continue to mature and be engaged in the work of the kingdom? What does evangelism and church growth really look like? From there, we move into what we call strategies for vital churches in terms of is there some things that we could be intentional about doing about breathing life into existing congregations. Now, we don't have the luxury of being Ezekiel. God asked Ezekiel, can these bones live? Ezekiel, he got it off of him and said, Lord, you know. We don't get to tell you, Lord, you know. We have to sort of walk through you with that process in terms of, are there some best practices out there that we can utilize? One of the other tracks is, of course, pastoral therapy and counseling. That's one of our new tracks. We're excited about that track. That track actually allows you to take some additional hours, do some additional work, and get your state certification in that track. So, of course, there are some vocational and employment possibilities attached to that we were glad to share with those who may be interested in that program. I think we've already agreed that there's no real reason to sort of discuss the Korean Dmin. If you're interested in the Korean Dmin, just sort of see me afterwards, and I'll give you more information on that. Now, that's a whole lot, real quick. That's by design, so that we'll have ample time to sort of field your questions and address any concerns that you may have. But I do want to say this. And I say it honestly, but also perhaps even a bit arrogantly. MTS is hands down, in my opinion, one of the best Dmin programs in the country. And that's because we are unapologetic in the fact that this is a terminal degree in the practice of ministry. We want you to understand that this is about the practice of ministry. We want you to leave this place as an authority and as an expert in the particular area of practice where you are engaged. We don't apologize for that. We don't make light of that, because that's what the Dmin is all about. It is about the practice of ministry. So if you're interested in growing as a practitioner, you've picked the right program, and you've certainly picked the right place. And in the words of that great commentator on contemporary context, Forrest Gump, that's all I got to say about that. Questions, comments, concerns, feedback, because some of your questions, depending upon the track, that's the reason we've got Michael and Barry here. They're going to, they may be able to answer some of the questions around our church, forming and growing church in the 21st century track. I'll field the preaching track questions. I guess I'll also have to field the question about pastoral therapy. And we've actually got a couple of students in here who are presently in the Dmin track at MTS. So, of course, you'll even ask them some questions. But, of course, I want you to know they're down there. I'm here. So before they answer, I'll squint my eyes and make eye contact with them and make sure they stay on script with their answers.
So I'm interested in the pastoral therapy
Okay.
track that was starting fall of 19, is that correct? And I would be coming in with graduate credits from Wake Forest in clinical mental health. Is there a way to use them as electives or something like that that lead, because they all lead toward licensure?
What we will, in your particular case, what we'll end up doing, now of course, they won't have any real significance, quote unquote, in the required residency.
Right.
But where they will prove to be helpful, once we're able to evaluate what you've taken, they may fulfill some of the required additional courses in order to get the state license. Yes.
And you have someone here on staff that kind of walks through
Yes,
and mentors through the licensure process for the state.
Yes, Dr. Ron McDonald, who gives leadership to that particular program, he'll be able to walk through that with you in terms of the courses you've already taken.
Dr. McDonald also works at Church Health, and he is a licensed counselor, so he knows.
And one of the things about that particular program, whereas the other tracks have what we call immersion, where we actually go away, they are involved in, they work with a licensed counselor through their process, right, that type of thing.
And you dig just a little deeper on the leadership.
Okay. Specifically?
I just need to have a bit more understanding of what's going on in that area.
Okay. Let me refer to my notes. It begins with, of course, as does most of our tracks, we begin with some type of historical and theological basis. For the group that's starting this summer, Our president, Dr. J. Earhart Brown, is going to actually teach the first class. It's going to be the theology and history of Christian leadership, looking at leadership from a biblical perspective. Once you complete that course, the next course is going to be on leadership and spiritual formation. One of the things that we inherently believe that if you're going to be an effective leader in the context of church, it becomes needful and necessary for you to continue to grow and form and mature as a leader. So one of the things that you'll do is we will look specifically at the relationship between leadership and your own spiritual formation as a leader. One of the things that we believe is that if a person stays in a context long enough, then that setting, that church, that context begins to take on the characteristics and traits of that leader. And if that be true, then it's necessary for us to make sure that you continue to grow and evolve and be formed as a leader. So that tends to be the focus of that particular course. Then with the next course, we look at organizational leadership specifically in an urban context. One of the things that we do understand as the church continues to evolve, what may have been effective practices, say 10 or 15 years ago, are no longer effective because, of course, we're attempting to lead a church now, or a generation now, that we've never seen before. So some of the things that we used to once safely assume as it pertains to church, we can no longer assume that. I mean, whoever thought we would arrive at a place where you would be trying to do ministry in the Bible Belt, and there were people who had never really even heard the Bible? Well, that's the age in which we live, and it's necessary for people who are leading in those contexts to be aware of that. The next course is going to focus on transformational leadership for social change in terms of we're going to be mindful of some of the things that are going on, not only just in the local church, but in the larger church, in the body of Christ, and how that impacts the local church, and how we begin to sort of lead our congregations through some of those areas. Of course, once we come out of that, we begin to move into the independent study as it pertains to the development of your project.
Okay, thank you much.
Okay?
What is the immersion trip?
That's another thing that makes our program unique. By the time you arrive at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, by the time you arrive at residency 5, we actually attempt to immerse you in just a particular context that's focusing specifically on what your discipline is. I'll give you an example of what I mean. For instance, in the leadership track, we are now looking at the possibility of taking our students to be a part of a leadership forum that's going to take place at Harvard. And so, of course, we'll spend a couple of weeks there being exposed and so forth. In our last, not this preaching track, but our previous preaching track, one of the things that they got an opportunity to do was travel to Louisville, Kentucky, and participate in the Academy of Preachers. Now, what was so interesting about that is, not only did they get to go and hear and learn, but then they got an opportunity to pour into, for lack of a better term, MDiv students who were on the MDiv track. So they got to critique sermons, offer some feedback. So they got an opportunity to be on both sides of it. So again, one of the things that we try to do in the immersion is move you in a context other than the classroom here at MTS so that we can see best, so we can look at some practices, some approaches in a different context.
Can you talk a little bit about how the courses are designed? So I see July and January, what times do they meet? What's the time frame?
Okay, that's a good question. I'm glad you brought that up because I made myself a note to be sure to mention this because it creates some confusion. Should you decide to become a part of the Dmin program at MTS, technically your semester begins May the 1st. The semester goes from May the 1st through October the 31st. So they'll run a full traditional 13 weeks. They'll run a full 13 weeks. Well, within that 13 weeks, you will have what we refer to as a 2-week residency. So you'll get the syllabus on May the 1st. We have some expectation about some readings and some works that you will have done prior to your arrival. It may be a paper, maybe some reflections. So you'll already be engaged in some conversation electronically with the professor for that particular residency. When you come here for the residency during those 2 weeks, that's designed to sort of be a 2-week intensive, where you spend the entire focus is on that particular area, that particular discipline. You get a chance to interface and interact with the professor for 2 weeks. You get a chance to meet some of your colleagues that are in the cohort, learn from one another, so forth. And when that's over, typically you'll still have an assignment or two to complete that have to be submitted electronically before the semester ends.
So that's pretty much an all-day thing during those 2 weeks?
Yes, during those 2 weeks.
It's like very intensive.
Right.
Okay.
A normal intensive, we will start at about 8:30 that morning, and we go until about 4:30 in the afternoon. So it's all day for 2 weeks.
Do you have those dates?
Let's see, right now, the summer residency is scheduled for July the 9th through the 20th,
For everybody except for the land, food, and
except for Land, Food, and Faith. They're gonna have their residency, I think, in June, because of course, the weather is a bit more amenable to farming in June than it is in July.
And with the exception of the health and faith, with the pastoral therapy track.
What's
No,
that?
it has the same calendar.
It has the
Yes,
same
same
calendar.
calendar. The only track that has a different residency than is the food, land, and faith, because of farming, so,
But the pastoral therapy doesn't start until 19.
Correct.
Summer of 19.
correct.
So is this enough time to do all the administrative stuff before the July 9th day?
Well, technically, the semester begins May 1st.
Is it enough time to start all, do that?
Absolutely.
What administrative do you mean?
Well, I'm looking through the packet and there's the application references and all of that.
Right, so you only have till March 31st for that. Application deadline is March 31st.
Okay.
But the application process is actually for the Dmin has been streamlined tremendously. So basically you're looking at your application, your essay, and a couple of references.
That's
And your transcripts.
Yeah, yeah,
If
yeah,
you went
yeah.
here for your Master's of Divinity, when you already have them on file, you wouldn't have to get those, but if you didn't, then you wouldn't have to send any of the transcript for undergraduate and your master's work. But you have plenty of time, you've got time.
We've had it
They'll
done,
work with you, you can do it.
we've had it done in much
Yes.
tighter time.
Qualities.
Yes, sir.
You know, that's a part of the ethos at MTS. Of course, we're gonna work with you.
Of course you
We're gonna cheer you along every step of the way. You can do it, Qualities, you can do it.
I do.
Don't let it overwhelm you, you can.
Other questions?
The next time preaching will be offered?
Will be summer 19. Summer 19,
Both the pastoral therapy and the preaching.
and preaching, yes. This upcoming summer, we are starting the Land, Food, and Faith, Leadership, and Forming and Growing Churches in the 21st Century. Those are the programs that begin this upcoming summer.
Aside from standard like financial aid, FAFSA loan grants from that resource, what funds are available to Dmin students?
That's essentially it. Now some of our students have some denominational support, right? But primarily, it's financial aid, FAFSA, so forth and so on.
And it does.
However, Dr. Qualls has promised us that if he ever hits the lottery, he's going to remember us.
All being mentors, you have a free ride at that point. I think that's by ticket though, right?
That's correct, Mike.
Yeah, I looked in.
Okay, so much for that scholarship. So perhaps we should eliminate that from the list of possible funding.
He was just kind of canceled in at this point.
Don't put it again. There you go. There you go.
No,
Yes, sir.
for the project design, it's two different courses. How did you work on that final phase with each student?
What will happen is, in residency 4, you will be at what we refer to as, you'll be admitted into candidacy. What that means is you have a completed project proposal that you have met with your assigned faculty advisor, that they're comfortable in the direction in which you're moving, and they're giving you the green light to begin the implementation stage of your project. After you've successfully implemented your project, then of course you will begin to write up what your findings were, so forth and so on. And so residency 6 and residency 7 are primarily dedicated to that particular process. And then of course in residency 7 is when you will participate in what we refer to as our oral exam. Some in PhD program is referred to as your defense. And that's based, but here, it is essentially just a conversation about your work. You will tell us about your project, what the experience has been, what challenges you may have faced. If you had to do the program again, what would you do differently? At that particular juncture now, it's not as nearly as much pressure as people think, which it shouldn't be, because you are the authority on your project. When you sit down for your oral exam, no one at the table knows more about your project than you and your faculty advisor. And so all we're basically saying is, tell us about your work.
And then for my personal interest, it's, as you may know, I'm Latino, and I'm trying to imagine how, I don't know if you have like more experienced people collaborating in the Hispanic community.
Okay.
And I don't know if I should consider like some exposures to other schools or other universities to have like an immersion or something like that, and I don't know if you can offer that, or should I start thinking like doing something in elsewhere?
Okay, what track are you interested in?
Leadership.
You're looking specifically at the leadership track. No, I think one of the things that you're going to discover is that our program is broad enough that we will certainly be, and one of the things that you can count on in terms of our instructors, we will be mindful of everyone in the cohort. So it will not be lost on us that your focus, of course, will be in the Latino community. That will be your context. And so, of course, that will certainly be taken into consideration as the professors begin to give shape to those particular classes and what it's going to look like.
How many students are currently in each for divinity, for the doctorate currently?
Okay. We presently have total, I think the last number is it 61, Philippe, does that sound right? Across all.
60 was 32, and then how many are yours?
Some people that are on that final phase.
Right,
So I said,
42. Yeah, roughly around 60, because
Right.
those that are in the final phase.
Right, those who are already in phases 6 and 7 who are writing. But now typically our target goal is always to have at least 8 students in a cohort. That's the target. In order for us to start a particular cohort in a track, 8 is the target number. Now, our last 2 cohorts, which of course was the preaching cohort and the pastoral therapy, those cohorts had 15 students in them. So of course, but the target is always 8. That's the magic